One, it's I, Wacky Anime What If here to present you with What If Huggy Wuggy Became Deku. I hope you all enjoy this, and if you do, make sure you smash that like button into oblivion. Let's go ahead and get into this. Currently, Izuku Midoriya is in front of the man who's going to give him the worst news of his entire life. I'm sorry, Izuku. You are quirkless. As soon as he heard these words from the doctor in front of him, he fell to his knees, trembling, and tears running down his cheek. He cried as much as he could because he realized he might not be able to become a hero, but in his mind, he still wants to become one. He looks beside him and sees his mother right beside him, standing, looking at Izuku with complete and utter pity towards him. Her tears are running down her cheek while she looks like she's about to hug Midoriya. She hugs him as tightly as possible and says, "I'm sorry, sweetie, but you can't become a hero without a quirk." Once Izuku heard those words, in his head, he thought, I can still become a hero. I can still do it. And he said it out loud, while immediately Inko said, "You can't become a hero. I'm telling you this for your own good. Even though you're a kid, I don't want you dead set on that. Because if you do, and you die because you don't have any power to defend yourself, then you'll just be another victim, another damsel in distress for heroes to save." As she says this to him, he puts his head downwards, and his tears continue to roll for what seems like hours, until the doctor in front of them looks at them and says, "Could you go ahead and leave? Just take the... You know what? I have a good idea how to cheer up your kid," is what he says to Inko. And Inko says, How do you think I should cheer him up, exactly?" The doctor immediately pulls out a coupon from out of his wallet and says, "I won this last year. It's apparently a tour towards a new factory that's opening up. I heard they sell toys and many other things. You could go visit there. I personally don't really like factories or toy factories. After all, I'm an adult after all." He hands it to Izuku, hands a coupon. Izuku grabs his coupon and he reads it, and it says, "Poppy Playtime Factory, where the fun will never end, and you'll never want to go home," with an exclamation mark. While he was reading this, Inko immediately felt shivers through her entire being, saying not to go there. But Izuku's eyes were lighting up. His eyes felt like Christmas stars. They felt like complete hope and complete happiness and joy. He looked at his mom with hopeful eyes that she'll take him to this toy factory. She immediately did not want to. She said, "No, Izuku, I'll take you somewhere else. We can go get some ice cream." While Izuku looked downwards and said, "Okay." Inko immediately picked him up, walked towards the car. They got in the car. As soon as they got into the car, she drove them to get some ice cream. While they walked into the ice cream store after getting out of the car, he immediately asked, "Mom, why don't you want me to go to the toy factory?" While Inko immediately says, "Well, it's because I have a weird feeling. Honestly, it feels dangerous." She immediately says out loud, but then she realizes how stupid she is. She realizes how stupid it is to think a toy factory of all places that's very popular for children would be dangerous. And they have an official coupon, an official tour coupon, to manage to go there. Why would it be that bad of a thing, is what she's thinking while they're eating ice cream at the table in front of the store. She immediately asks Izuku, "Do you actually want to go there?" Izuku looks up at her once he's in his seat eating his ice cream and says, "Yes, Mom. I want to go see all the new toys. They're very interesting," he says with a smile. his golden smile that radiates light, and Inko feels as if she's staring directly into the sun, and she looks away with some sweat coming down her face, and she says, "I guess we could go. Come on, make sure you get your ice cream and get in the car as quickly as possible before I change my mind," is what she said with a smile. And right after hearing that, Izuku immediately crammed the entire ice cream cone in his mouth and started eating it very quickly. And then Inko immediately said, "Well, I didn't mean to actually rush it that quickly." And Izuku immediately had a brain freeze after finishing the ice cream. He ran into the car, he sat down into the passenger seat while Inko ran towards him and was trying to find out if he still had that, brain freeze. But he said he didn't and he's fine to go. While she moved over to her side of the car, she got in the driver's seat and started to drive towards the toy factory. It was quite a distance away. It was all the way into the countryside almost. But she would do anything to cheer up her boy. After all, him not having a quirk is going to affect him for the rest of his life. I should try to make it less burdensome for him, is what she's thinking. While immediately Izuku's staring at the coupon and saying, "This is amazing. We're going to go to a toy factory. I've never been to one." While he's jumping up and down in his passenger seat, and Inko just looks towards the side towards him and says, "Hey, stop jumping up and down. I'm still driving. I can't afford to look over there in case you're, out of your seatbelt or anything." While immediately Izuku says, "Sorry, Mom." And he realizes he didn't put on his seatbelt. So he immediately grabs for a seatbelt and connects it. Then Inko continues driving all the way towards the factory, which is a few hours in. Once she arrives, she's in the woods, in more of a woodland area, driving down a road, and she sees in front of her a giant toy factory. It seems abandoned. She has an ominous presence towards it, and she's thinking about turning back, but then she realizes looks could be deceiving, is what she thinks. She gets out of the car, she walks up towards it, and she knocks on the door. Once she does, all the lights in the entire toy factory open up. All of them turn on at the same time. And she hears music. It sounds like a kid's song. "Welcome to Poppy's Playtime, where the fun is everywhere. Up and down the stairs, all around in your hair." Immediately she is unsettled because the voice starts getting more distorted in the song, until a person appears at the door and opens it and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, if I startled you," as Inko is jumping backwards and falling to the ground, almost screamed in shock. Before she saw that it was just a young man who was working there, she thought it wasn't even really working. She thought it was an abandoned toy factory at first when they approached. But once they saw the lights and everything, they realized it wasn't. She immediately asked him, "Why is the song playing like that, and why is it getting more distorted?" And the man immediately answered, "It's only getting more distorted because we're trying to fix it. Currently we're trying to fix it because it's been scaring all the children that have been visiting." Once he says this, she immediately understands because this happens in certain places. Certain songs would end up going off the fritz, or someone could use their quirk on it, is what the employee told her also, which could be possible. She immediately gets Izuku and says, "Come on, let's go ahead and go in." Izuku walks up towards the guy and says, Can you show me the tour of the toys?" while jumping up and downwards. And the man immediately, as sweat dropped down his face, his eyes and pupils immediately start to shrink while he's looking at Izuku, and he starts to lose it a little bit, and he screams out, "You gotta get out of here before he finds you." He says this towards towards the boy, which immediately screams it. And all of a sudden, he hears a footstep behind him, and he says, "Oh no, the boss has arrived." He whispers, while Inko and Midori are trying to figure out why he was yelling at. She was trying to figure out why he's yelling at her son. While there's a man appearing behind the current employee in front of her, and the man just walks up towards them and says, "Well, won't you come in so we can give you a tour of the place? I am the current owner of this factory, and don't mind Mark over here. He's kind of mentally unstable. He's not the best at his job, but we had to hire him because of that. Well, because we didn't have the heart to turn someone down that was disabled like this." He immediately looks towards them and says, "So if you wouldn't mind, could you ignore what he did? It's just because he has some episodes." While the guy looks at the boss and says, "You know damn well it's not an episode. You know what happens when people come in here." He says that as loud as possible. Inko's starting to get worried. Sweat goes down her face. She grabs Izuku's hand and she's about to head outwards. She turns around and is about to head outwards. But immediately the boss of the toy factory snaps his fingers and security come out and drag Mark out of the toy factory and into a car, and they drive off. Immediately the boss says, "I'm sorry, but my employee had to go take his medicine. He didn't take his medicine this morning, and he's been having tons and tons of episodes about toys coming to life and, well, just coming to life and all together." While he says this, Izuku's eyes light up while Inko's trying to drag him away, but his eyes light up so brightly while he's staring at the old man who's currently the owner of the toy factory when he said that the toys were alive. Izuku immediately said, "Wait, are they alive? Are they alive?" while jumping up and downwards and wanting to head back there as quickly as possible. But his mother's grip was not loosening. She was trying to drag him into the car, but immediately Izuku lost grip, got his hand out of her grip, and ran towards the boss and said, "Can you show me? Can you show me?" While the boss merely laughed and said, "Of course I can," while extending out his hand. "I'll show you the grand tour of the place. After all, you do have the coupon in your hand, don't you?" While Izuku looks at his left hand and realizes he has the coupon, he hands it towards the boss, and he says, well then, let me just go ahead and take this. He looks at the coupon and says, "Yes, this seems like our coupon," while consistently putting it towards the sun and says, "It's not a fake, so I guess you guys can take the tour. But please make sure you stay with our tour guide," which is currently going to be me. "Make sure you don't go off on your own. It's still dangerous. After all, you could fall on the machinery or many other incidents, so please do not go away from me." While immediately Inko says, "Izuku, now, come over here now. We're not going to this place." While Midoriya looks back at Inko, who's walking towards the car, almost at the car, and looked back at him and said, come on, we're gonna go." While Izuku immediately says, "Come on, you heard him. It's safe as long as we stay with him." While having complete stars in his eyes, while he's staring at her, and she immediately sighs and says, "Fine, we'll take the tour, but you just have to stay with this tour guide." Izuku immediately says, "Of course I will," while he's jumping up and down in joy. He immediately walks towards the boss, who he extends his hand out and says, "Can you take me to the toys?" While he says, "Okay, I can take you to the toys. Come on, Inko, Midoriya. Your son is currently very anxious, and I think you probably want this to be over with, so let's go ahead and get started." Ingo walks right towards the man and follows him into the factory. Once they enter the factory, they see it's painted with multiple colors of red, yellow, and purple. And they notice that the factory is very colorful, They're walking down aisles where toys are being made, stuffed, and thrown into their containers and boxed. Izuku's watching all the process and thinks it's marvelous, and is very excited to see the entire toys when they're finished, because he's seeing the whole process while he's walking on the aisle and looking through the glass. He's seeing it happen on a conveyor belt. He sees this one blue doll that has dark eyes and yellow mittens. He immediately thinks, that looks very cool. I like that. While staring at it while it's being made. It's being stuffed, and while it's being stuffed, Izuku sees that its eyes are moving towards him, and he's thinking, wait, maybe these toys are alive, because the hand moves outwards and is immediately facing towards where the glass is. It's a one-sided mirror, but the doll seems to know where Izuku is and where the others are. He's stretching his hand out towards Izuku while on the conveyor belt being pushed along. Immediately, Izuku saw that was very, very much a kind gesture. It looked like he was lonely or he wanted a friend, because he was waving by the time he was being sent through the conveyor to be perfectly made into a toy. Izuku immediately looked up to the sides of him and saw that the boss of the toy factory and Inko were talking, and they were walking. Inko was currently talking to the boss about certain things about the factory. Is it actually safe? Is there any safety hazards you haven't told me about? And many more like that. While they were walking away and thinking that Izuku was following them, he was not. He walked the opposite way, and he saw a sign that said, Toy Room, Toy Packaging. He walked down to the left and went towards toy packaging. Once he went there, he saw the end of the conveyor bring out what looked like a blue furry buddy who looked like a cookie monster with yellow mittens and blank eyes and a very big mouth with a happy smile on it. Izuku saw it coming out of the conveyor, immediately ran up towards it, and said, so cool, so cool. He picked it up and lifted it in front of him, and he said, I like this. And he noticed something. The eyes started to move while it was in front of him while he's lifting it up. They moved towards him, and the hand started to move, and it started to wrap around him. Started to squeeze him right in front of him. It felt like he was in a hug. The toy is hugging him. He hugs back, and he says, do you want to be my friend? While the toy merely says, yes, I want to be your friend. And Izuku immediately says, what's your name? The toy immediately says, my name's Huggy Wuggy. I'll be your friend if you want. While Izuku immediately says, I never had any friends before, except for Kachan. So getting a new friend is amazing. While he's hugging onto the toy in front of him while saying this, he immediately ends up feeling something off. He ends up feeling odd. He feels weaker, and the toy is currently tugging a little bit too tight. He immediately says, could you let go real quick? I can't breathe. While the toy seems to be squeezing more and more. While the toy says, friends let friends borrow things, don't they? While Izuku innocently says, yes, they do, but what is that? What does that have to do to what's happening right now? Could you please let go of me? He's starting to panic. His breathing's starting to become erratic. And Huggy Wuggy immediately says, can I borrow something from you, my best friend? While Izuku immediately says, sure, if you can let go of me real quick. Huggy Wuggy lets go and says, I'm sorry if I hurt you. I just didn't know how to control my strength. while looking at Izuku. And Izuku says, "It's okay. So what did you want to borrow?" While the Huggy Wuggy toy immediately smiled, and he had very sharp teeth, and he said, "I want to borrow your body." While Izuku said, "I don't think you can borrow," before Huggy Wuggy put his left hand in Midoriya's mouth and opened his jaw, and opened his jaws open, and then he shoved himself in. Immediately shoved himself inside and says, "I'm gonna wear you like a flesh suit. Don't worry, you'll be alive and be conscious. I'll just be there to help you." And Izuku could feel the lungs the air in his lungs coming out, while Huggy Wuggy is trying to force himself in. And Izuku's trying to scream, but he can't get anything out. It's being muffled, and Huggy Wuggy's putting his head all the way in, and then he's putting his arms in, and he's going inside. And he immediately starts forcing himself in while he's having muffled screams. All of a sudden, the boss and Inko notice when they look behind them that Izuku is not there. Inko becomes immediately worried and says, "Where's my baby boy?" And she's starting to frantically panic. And she tells him, where is he? While looking at the boss. And he says, "I don't know, but I think we should check in the packaging. After all, certain incidents happen there." While he says this, Inko immediately says, "What incidents? What incidents happened there?" While looking at him, he immediately said, "Well, I didn't believe what they said, but they said it was some type of toy that came to life, and it did some questionable things. It befriended people, is what some workers said. And others said that it didn't just befriend them, it borrowed things from them. I don't know what this thing is, if it's true, but I don't think it is. I think it might have just got lost somewhere. Just in case, let's go check packaging." He runs off with Inko, and they reach all the way to the packaging, and they open the door. Once they do, they just see Izuku alone, by himself, looking at all the toys, with stars in his eyes. And he looks behind him and says, Hi there. How are you doing?" Well, Inko immediately runs up towards him and gets down on the ground and hugs him. And says, Don't leave me like that. You didn't say anything. If you had to use a restroom, or if you got lost somewhere, if you want to go somewhere, go ahead and tell me at least." While she has some tears coming out of her eyes, and she says, "I'm just going to go ahead and take him home. We can't finish the rest of the tour. After all, he got separated, and we don't want any incidents to happen." While the boss immediately understood and said, "Well, I hope you both have a wonderful day. You're quite the special mother and daughter, well, mother and son." Izuku immediately says, "Wait, did you just call me a daughter? I'm a man." And the boss immediately says, "Well, I didn't know. Just go ahead and go." While Inko is carrying Izuku out, Izuku is staring exactly at the boss while leaving, since his face is directly behind Inko while being carried. He's looking into the boss's eyes, and all of a sudden, his eyes roll. They roll forward, all the way backwards, and they're all the way behind his head. His original eyes are, and new eyes start to pop out. But these are the same eyes as the Huggy Wuggy toys. The boss immediately gets very scared and is about to say something, but ends up seeing sharp teeth out of the boy's mouth. And he recognizes that if he says anything, then he'll become a victim, just like that boy. He immediately decides to say nothing. He decides to try to call the police right afterwards. After some time passes and they leave. Once Inko gets Izuku in the car, they immediately drive home, and Izuku immediately walks all the way into the house and goes immediately up to his room and opens the door and closes it behind him. While Inko follows him, and is outside of his door and just puts her back towards the door and slides down and says, Izuku, I know you're hurting because you don't have a quirk, and because I said you couldn't become a hero, and I know that was wrong of me to say. If you want to become a hero, you can become one if you just work hard enough. I'm sorry about what I said before. While she hears a voice on the other end, and it was Izuku saying, I know you didn't mean it, and I know you care for me. That's all I really need. I'll still try to become a hero, but I'll make sure that I don't fall into dangerous situations. I love you, Inko. While she immediately started to walk off afterwards and went down the stairs to make him some dinner, she immediately had a little siren ring in her head. A little alarm. She's never had her son call her Inko before. He's always called her Mom. Why is he calling her Inko? While in Izuku's room, currently, he's in his mind. He's thinking in his mind, I'm just borrowing your body for a little while, Izuku. While Izuku responds to Huggy Wuggy, who's currently in his body, and says, how long is a little while? While Huggy Wuggy says, I'll just borrow it for about a few days. I'll give it back, and we're pretty much fused now. I just want to feel what it's like to be human for a little bit. I'm sorry if I'm intruding. Izuku can immediately feel Huggy Wuggy's sadness, and he asks, why are you so sad? While Huggy Wuggy says, well, every single one of the people that I talked to when I was in that factory, once I talked to them, they treated me as a monster. They said I was a monster. I was something that shouldn't have existed. That I was just some weird creature. And they said that I'm not human and that I don't matter. Some of them threw me away when they got me. And I just ended up right back in the factory. And I didn't get what they mean when they said, you're not human and you don't have any emotions like one. I just wanted to feel what being a human truly is what Huggy Wuggy thinks. And Izuku immediately says, if you're only going to borrow it for a few days and you can give me back control of my body, I guess I'll allow it. Okay? While Huggy Wuggy immediately in his mind says, thank you, and I'm sorry about before when I squeezed you too hard. I have a lot of strength and I'm unable to control it. I might have overexerted it. I didn't mean anything by it. I promise. While Izuku immediately says, in his mind, okay, but anyway, we're still friends, right? While Huggy Wuggy says, yes, we're friends, and we can be friends forever. Forever. As Izuku immediately says it out loud, Huggy Wuggy says it out loud, while he laughs a little bit and says, I finally have a true friend. And that's the end of this What If. I hope you all enjoyed. If you do, obliterate that like button and there will be a part 2.